Metal Gear Solid, the game series where stealth is encouraged but mostly optional, and so many cutscenes you'd think you were watching a movie at times. With the recent release of Konami's Metal Gear Solid Delta, a remake of Snake Eater, the third game in the series, I was excited to try it out and share my thoughts as a relatively new Metal Gear Solid fan, and I made sure to put remake in quotations for a reason because, man, this is kind of the exact same game as the original. Sure, the graphics look better outside of some obvious lag in some areas, and they do offer a new modern playstyle in addition to the classic experience, but outside of that, this is basically the same candy, new wrapper, same soda, different cup, same... okay, yeah, you get the point. In today's video, I'm going to be giving a very brief summary of the plot, just in case some of you out there have not or don't plan on playing the game, which, shame on you. Afterwards, I'll give my own experience and tell a little bit about the differences between Delta and the original, why they're better or worse, and if you're lucky, I might include an epic fail or two. And at the end, I want to talk a little bit about a more serious look into the game's message and its commentary on society, which is my absolute favorite thing about the series as a whole, but this game in particular really does a lot. So like I mentioned earlier, Metal Gear Solid Delta is a remake of 2004's Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, originally developed by Kojima Productions, now rebuilt by Konami with updated visuals in Unreal Engine 5, for better or worse. Speaking of Hideo Kojima, although this is a remake of a game, this was Konami's first attempt at Metal Gear Solid without Kojima. Unless you consider the Master Collection ports or Revengeance, so I guess it's like their first shot at a mainline game. The game does retain the original story almost too similarly. It really is a faithful remake with modern polish. As with any Metal Gear Solid game, the story is very complex and full of historical references, as well as many twists, turns, and moments along the way. Apologies if I butcher this or leave something out, but I will now attempt to summarize the story while also being quite descriptive. So Naked Snake, aka John, aka Jack, aka the future Big Boss, is now on a mission in Russia as a member of Fox, which is a secret division of the CIA, I believe. This mission, known as Virtuous Mission, is to save a Russian scientist by the name of Sokolov, who is being forced against his will to help develop nuclear weapons. Snake has the trusty team of Major Tom, paramedic, and his mentor known simply as the Boss. Snake finds Sokolov, but before making out with him, making it out with him, Snake runs into a cocky son of a gun who goes by the name Ocelot, and before you can even begin to wonder why his name is Ocelot, he shows you by letting out some weird animal cry that made me feel the need to shed my skin like an actual snake because of the cringe. Anyways, he ends up goofing up and gets taken out pretty easily by Snake, which I'm sure that he won't take kindly to. All is going well for Snake as he's about to successfully extract Sokolov. That is, until the Boss shows up out of nowhere with the game's main antagonist, Colonel Volgin, some ripped psycho dude who can emit electricity from his body like Emperor Palpatine if he hit the gym. And not only is she hitting the scene with this guy, but she decides to defect and join him. Yeah, and for seemingly no reason too. While Snake doesn't get a reason quite yet, what he does get is his weapon taken apart, his arm broken, and yeeted off a bridge into the water below. But hey, at least he managed to grab the boss's bandana before he fell, because that helps, I guess? Well, luckily enough, Snake ends up surviving the experience and fixes himself up. But unluckily enough for some Russian scientists, with the boss's defection gift, Volgin decides to nuke a facility, much to the dismay of the boss, Ocelot, and some chick that is apparently Sokolov's lover. Fast forward a bit, and the gang is now getting back together for Operation Snake Eater, except obviously missing the boss, and now Major Tom has decided that he doesn't want to be Major Tom, he will just go by Major Zero. Operation Snake Eater tasks Snake with eliminating Volgin and his new nuclear weapon, the Shagohod, and finally, eliminating the boss herself. If Snake were to refuse or fail this mission, both he and Zero would be executed. The operation doesn't get off to a great start, as shortly after Snake lands, he's confronted by the boss and easily dealt with for a second time. She tells him to leave and go home, or be killed by her next time, but Snake knows he can't do that. So instead he heads off to meet Adam, who supposedly infiltrated Volgin's ranks and will help Snake. but instead, he ends up meeting a woman known as Eva, who can't give the right password to Snake's question, which should have been a major red flag, but he decides to trust her after she helps him fend off some Gru soldiers. Eva is your usual seductive blonde in spy movies, who I suppose is deathly terrified of having a heat stroke because she does far more removing of clothing than adding. And while at times Snake does clearly take the bait, he seems far more excited with the guns she gives him. It's at this moment you find out Snake is a very strong gun sexual. Right as you're about to leave, Ocelot shows up and grabs Eva. Maybe a little too grabby, might I add, as it seems that's a theme in this game. Ocelot again shows his inexperience by running out of ammo in his 6-shot revolver and gets his face ran on by Eva's motorcycle. Don't worry though, because it's not long before you run into Ocelot once more and end up having a duel with him that unfortunately is cut short by one of the members of the Cobra unit, which was the boss's unit that she used to lead. Snake has to dive into a cave to avoid being stung to death since he can't fling his gun around like Ocelot apparently. Snake doesn't have to wait too long to get his hands on the Pain, as soon he encounters him in the cave, and after defeat, the Pain yells out his name and proceeds to explode. You eventually run into Vulcan, the boss, Ocelot, Eva, and the remaining members of the Cobra unit, which are the Fear, the End, the Fury, and the Sorrow. Ocelot tries to play a game with Sokolov and makes him soil himself, but Boss slaps him. Vulcan expresses some inappropriate intentions with Eva, who apparently goes by Tatiana when she's undercover. In the end, an old man, supposedly near death, who is saving his energy for one last battle, is left out in his wheelchair. And, fun story, he can actually be taken out now to avoid a boss fight later. I just didn't have anything strong enough and fast enough to take him out before he rolled himself away. Snake uses a Russian scientist uniform that Eva gave him to sneak into the weapons base and encounters Granin, who is drunk and decides to help you because he's salty that his nuclear weapon, the Metal Gear, was not chosen for funding. He gives you a keycard to get into the mountains and rescue Sokolov, again, not to help keep the world safe, but so that they'll have no choice but to fund his nuclear weapon. Like, alright buddy, it's okay, I'm sure your weapon isn't that big of a deal, we'll probably never hear of a Metal Gear in the series ever again. On your way, you run into the Fear, who I don't remember being that difficult in the original game. In fact, I didn't really struggle with any fight in the original game, but Fear just kept jumping down from the trees to heal, and he was so fast I couldn't freaking catch him to take him out non-lethally, so yeah, this is kind of right around the point in the game where I kind of gave up the whole pacifist thing and started taking people out for real. So eventually you take him out and he decides to also yell his name and explode. This is going to be a reoccurring theme, so just prepare yourself. Snake doesn't have much time to rest because shortly after the fight with the Fear, he encounters the End, and the two take part in a slow but intense battle. This one was a little bit of a challenge for me, but if you're like me, when I played the original game, you can also just, turn your system's clock ahead a week and come back. And then it turns out that the End has died of old age. Boom roasted. And it's shortly after this that we get one of the most peak moments in the game. So try to listen and enjoy as best as you can while I'm singing. I give my life, not for honor, but for you. In my time, there'll be no one else. Crime, it's the way. I don't know this love. I'm still in a dream, snake eater. I'm still in a dream, snake eater. Next, you meet up with Eva, and she tells you that in order to infiltrate the next area, you'll need to disguise yourself as Ivan Rykov, who appears to be Vulcan's lover? Anyways, you head off after Eva fails to seduce Snake, the avid gun sexual, and encounter the last living member of the Cobra unit, the Fury. This ex-astronaut looks like one for sure, and uses his raging flames to snuff you out. but it's no use as he, just like the previous members, succumbs to Snake's pure aura, yells his name, and explodes. So you know, like a minute ago when I said Eva told you that you needed to disguise yourself as Rykov to get to Sokolov? Well, you do that, but Volgin is pretty easily able to see through your disguise, or should I say, feel through it. Anyways, you end up getting beat up by the boss again, big shocker, and then get beat down by Volgin, who takes you to get interrogated until the boss stops him, because she knew Snake wasn't going to relent any info. After all, the boss trained Snake. Volgin slips up and tells Snake about the Philosopher's Stone, Legacy, which is a huge sum of money locked away somewhere. He thought that's what Snake was there for, but, well, he wasn't. So, great job, Volgin. Things get even busier when Volgin orders Boss to cut out Snake's eyes to prove that she's not the traitor, but Eva intervenes, thus triggering Ocelot to play his good old roulette game with her, only for Snake to bump him as he's firing and catch some muzzle burn in the eye, thus rendering it useless. This is how we end up getting One-Eyed Naked Snake, aka Big Boss. Don't worry, Snake, eye patches are definitely in. You're not the only cool character to pull off the eye patch. Anyways, Volgin leaves satisfied since Snake did lose at least one eye, and the boss shoots you in the leg, but then gives you a gun? So, thanks, but was that shooting really necessary? Real quick right here, when you wake up in prison, save the game and load back into the game. Paramedic will warn you about not having any nightmares about Dracula, and well, yeah, this is some dream. Guy Savage is a neat little minigame that feels really fun to play, but unfortunately, it's not very long, and it carries no actual weight on the story. Once you escape from prison, you make your way through the underground sewer system, only to be tracked down by, who else? Ocelot and his dogs. In an unexpected move, Snake decides to just jump backwards off into the water, and that could have been a cool idea, if not for the fact that he encounters the Sorrow and is forced to come face to face with the souls of all the lives he's taken on the mission. If I had been able to continue with my initial pacifist run, this part would have been way easier. Unfortunately, I was forced to compromise certain individuals to a permanent end, so while this was a really cool idea for the game, it's terrifying when you move so slow and get bumped all the time and jump scared every time you get bumped. This fight is mainly only a fight against your patience. After meeting with Eva under a waterfall and receiving an eye patch, as well as your items back, you had to plant some C3 in their base, only to be snuffed out by Volgin and the boss. Now, Volgin is aware Eva is a spy, so he decides to tell you more about the Philosopher's Legacy. Because he's confident he'll kill you, I guess. Halfway through a battle with him, and dude is really starting to realize he might not be that guy. So he orders Ocelot to shoot him, to which Ocelot refuses and basically calls out Volgin for being soft. After disposing of Volgin, Snake and Eva quickly need to bail, except for the fact that Volgin is, well, very much not disposed of, and is now controlling the Shagohod. The next several minutes consist of riding around on Eva, her motorcycle, in the buddy seat, while you temporarily use infinite ammo to take everyone out, because I guess Eva really keeps a good stock in that sidecar. Eventually, you blow up a bridge that the Shagohod's on, which seems cool, but is clearly not enough to take it out. So, of course, you end up doing some serious battle with Volgin and the Shagohod, both on and off the motorcycle. And after doing so, you kinda just have to wonder, dude, you chose that over the Metal Gear? You can't be surprised that you failed. Now that Volgin and the Shagohod are destroyed, everything is peachy, except Snake still has one final task to complete his mission. He still has to take out the boss, once and for all. And what is a really beautiful sequence, including both the fight, the cutscene. Look, I'm not going to go into every detail here, as I really want you to experience this part for yourself in order to understand it all, but it's sad, it's gripping, it just gives a great end to everything. But nonetheless, after taking out the boss, Snake and Eva still have to get out of there, as the boss called in some troops in case Snake lingered too long and wouldn't kill her. As they are trying to fly out, Ocelot catches up with them for one last encounter. The two tussle for a bit, and eventually Ocelot offers to play one last game of roulette. Snake accepts, and in a pretty neat twist, you find out that it doesn't really matter which gun you choose, because the one bullet Ocelot loaded was just a blank. He tells Snake that his real name is Adamska, asks Snake for his, and pieces out. Snake and Eva then share some glasses of wine once they've made it to safety, and engage in what we can only presume to be premarital coitus, all while Snake is still wearing his gear. comfy. Snake wakes up the next morning and unfortunately not to breakfast. Nope, turns out Eva didn't stay for breakfast. She left and took the philosopher's legacy with her. She was supposed to kill him but opted not to because she made a promise to the boss. Turns out Eva was actually working as a double, or I guess triple technically, for China and some of the philosophers. In a sick twisted turn of events, you find out via a tape that Eva left for you that the boss had never truly defected. In fact, she was actually tasked with being a double herself to find the whereabouts of the legacy for the United States to use, and after Volgin unexpectedly fired a nuke at the facility, she was made the scapegoat and branded a war criminal. Snake then realizes that he just killed his mentor, an innocent woman, not because she defected and had deserved it, but because he was a soldier, and being a soldier, he is loyal to the government and to the mission, and that was his mission, whether he liked it or not. And that was also the boss's mission. She was well aware that she needed to die, but she couldn't kill herself. It's evident that this is where Snake's character takes a turn towards the dark side, as when he is seen meeting with the president and other high-ranking officials in the White House, he doesn't have an ounce of gratitude. He doesn't even really want to shake their hand. He's awarded a medal, but why? What for? For killing his mentor under the belief of a lie, to which he had no choice, or else he'd be executed. And for what reason? So the government can get some more play money to use for war? It just seems like this is the tragic life of a soldier. Finally, Snake heads off to the boss's grave to give one final salute and lay down her gun, the Patriot, in a scene that got me just as much the second time as it did the first. With the story out of the way, I'd like to say that I really wanted to enjoy Metal Gear Solid Delta, and I did, to a degree, but there were definitely things that obstructed that enjoyment at times. The gameplay felt new and refreshing with the modern style, and it was mostly pretty good, but during boss fights or high intensity moments, they really tested your skills, and that was when the glaring issues came to light. Some of the controls just don't really feel the greatest. I had to change the controls for carrying people from toggle to hold because I couldn't walk and move the camera at the same time. The CQC was really inconsistent and didn't even work a couple times. I kept getting shot and had to stop the game to heal every 5 seconds, which really broke the flow of the game and meant I was spending more time in the menus. The Volgin in the boss fight specifically had me struggling. The only new things I can think to mention outside of the graphics and the control scheme are maybe some of the new camos and face paints. Being honest, I didn't really change them a bunch, as I'm someone that mainly just prefers to put on whatever looks cool or whatever is supposed to be like what the character's actually wearing in the game. But there are some new ones that offer some special gameplay effects, which were helpful during those annoying sequences where the game was cheesing me. Alright, now I want to take a second to talk about the game's message, which after Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 being Gene and meme, yeah, meme. Trust me, the series loves its memes, but not the kind of meme that you're probably thinking of.
Memes, the DNA of the soul, they shape our world. They are the culture. They are everything we pass on.
Metal Gear Solid 3's theme is scene. Scene deals heavily with cultural relativism and the idea that concepts such as right and wrong, or allies and enemies, are not absolute or eternal, but instead are personal and transitive, shaped by our cultures, our society, our beliefs, and the times that we live in. The boss is the major illustrator of the scene theme. Her speech before the last battle in Metal Gear Solid 3 poses the dramatically ironic point that in the 21st century, America and Russia might not even be enemies anymore. The boss is a victim of circumstance. Her scene, Cold War-era America, forces her to ultimately give her life. Snake is forced to kill his former mentor due to a scene that he not only has no control over, but also has no knowledge of. All the major characters of Metal Gear Solid 3 are affected by a scene. Eva is forced into a deadly game of espionage in which she falls in love, ultimately causing heartbreak. Sokolov is forced to build weapons as a result of the climate of fear and deterrence, which nearly led to his death. Volgin becomes consumed by power due to the legacy he inherits. The scene of the Cold War consumes him, turning him into a madman consumed by the desire to win the Cold War by disposing Khrushchev and creating the perfect weapon. He also suffers death due to the scene. The sorrow is a foil through which the tragic scene of the boss is shown. The Cold War, which was the scene that splits the Cobra unit apart, causes the boss to kill her former lover. The Sorrow refuses to let go, clinging to the place or the scene where he was killed. Obviously, the central tragedy of Snake Eater is Snake being forced to kill his mentor, the boss. To him, she's just a traitor who abandoned everything they stood for. To the government, however, she's just a scapegoat. The truth is far more complicated. The boss sacrificed herself for peace and branded as a traitor to preserve political balance. Her death leaves Snake with the crushing realization that hero and villain are labels assigned by those in power, not by the truth of someone's character. It's more than just what side you're on. Sure, we have our religions, our political sides, among others, but even then, how much can you trust the people that you're loyal to? Early on in the Virtuous mission, the first time you're introduced to the boss via Kodak call, she asks you what you're going to be loyal to. We can be loyal to people, the government, its laws and rules. We can be loyal to God, or even just our morals and our beliefs. You have to weigh the pros and cons and figure it out for yourself. Beliefs can be wrong or just based off emotion. People can make mistakes, they can lie or use you, or just not have your best interest at heart. Morals can be trustworthy until they're twisted with trauma or if someone experiences a poor upbringing. And we've seen time and time again how the government can lead you astray or tell you only what they want you to hear. How many times in society have we been told things about people from our politicians, our celebrities, and even friends or family that so-and-so is our enemy, they did this, or so-and-so is our friend, they did that, only to find out the complete opposite later on? You have to ask yourself the question, are you going to be blindly loyal to something like a sheep being led astray, or are you loyal because you've seen and you have experienced the truth? Snake Eater makes it clear there are no permanent enemies, no eternal allies. Governments will shift, ideologies do collide, and who you fight today might very well be who you fight beside tomorrow, and vice versa. The boss herself sums it up. Loyalty to the end. But that loyalty isn't to politicians, governments, or even countries, because those things are fragile, and they will let you down eventually. What should we be loyal to? The game asks us to consider something deeper, ideals, morality, or whatever foundation we live our lives by. For some, such as myself, that's my faith in God. For others, it's personal values like honesty, courage, or compassion, things their parents or families may have brought them up to believe in. But the point is the same, loyalty to something solid, something firm and concrete, not to things that can be manipulated or changed. And here's where Snake Eater's message becomes timeless. The idea of absolute enemies is absolutely something that we see in real life too. People all the time get written off, demonized, and treated as if they're only the sum of their worst moments. We are way too quick to label each other as enemies and too quick to dig trenches between us and them. We feel the need to put an end or run away from any opinions that we don't like, as opposed to understanding that people may be in different life circumstances than us or have different backgrounds that influence their beliefs. The truth is way more complicated. No one is always your absolute enemy, and no one is always going to be your ally for every issue. We're human beings. We're going to have differences. We're going to grow up in different backgrounds and have different beliefs. But one thing is for certain, we're not pawns in a political game or to be used so that other people can spread misinformation and twist us to hate each other. Snake's tragedy was realizing this only after losing the boss. Our challenge is to realize it before we lose people in our own lives that we care about. Snake's entire arc after Snake Eater is shaped by this lesson. His mistrust of governments, his conflicted relationships with allies like Ocelot and Kaz and Metal Gear Solid 5, his descent into becoming Big Boss. All of it stems from the moment he pulled the trigger on the boss. Metal Gear Solid Delta shows how much the original story holds up. It's campy at times, yes, but it's also timeless in its themes. The remake preserves both tones, absurd moments like fighting a guy powered by bees, along the gut punch emotional ones. For any longtime or returning fans, I think you'll probably find that you want to stick with the original, as the new graphics just aren't enough to combat the nostalgia of the OG. If you're like me though, and you aren't married to the original game, I do think because it's so similar story-wise, you're not really missing anything by playing Delta and enjoying the updated visuals and optional playstyles, so you don't feel like you have to play the original. One thing is for sure, however, this game was definitely not worth a whopping 70 bones. I feel like the better price would have been 40, because maybe then it wouldn't have felt like such a slap in the face, and other remakes these days are also going for around the same price. At the end of the day, Snake Eater is less about who you kill in the jungle, and more about what you carry with you after the mission's over. After all, enemies don't stay enemies forever, allies won't always be your allies, but your loyalty? Well, that's what you live and die with.